All right, I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can because I don't know when my mom's going to show back up from class or anything. I mean, she's coming from Las Positas College to Patterson, California, so, and Las Positas is in Livermore, a little further than her job. Um, but I want to talk about something. You see, I asked Jeff Shiegel, the Schleg Daddy, this question early this morning. I guess I was a little too late, or was I, when I came to asking it. But I wanted to know what his thoughts, and all in all, what your guys' thoughts are um, of when WCW back in the 90s, mid 90s, if you will, and this is not just for the what I'm about for these championships that I'm about to talk about, but this has to do with any championship um, that is no longer that basically really had some importance but didn't really last very long. And this is focused on the women's championship, the women's cruiserweight championship, the cruiserweight tag titles, and then, of course, two championships that were part of WCW but then were abandoned, the US and the six-man tag. You see, here's my thoughts on the US and six-man tag belts. The six-man tag belts, I believe, are a championship that needs to come back to wrestling. I've always been a fan of that. I remember when I first started watching sort of in between WWE, when it was WWF, and WCW when it was still affiliated with the NWA, I remember watching back and forth. And I remember one of the more featured championships at times, especially on Saturday night or main event, or even on some pay-per-views, maybe even the Clash of Champions at times, was the six-man tag team titles. And for some reason, I've always was a fan of that championship because when you look back on it now, it gave more people an opportunity to get out there and be seen on television. It gave them more of an opportunity to be, gave them more of an opportunity to be somebody, to be a champion, to be showcased, to allow their talents to be showcased. I always liked that about that championship because it didn't just give two, it gave three guys an opportunity to go out there, like I said, and showcase what they can do and perform and get an opportunity to get noticed, not just by the WCW NWA officials, but by possibly other promotions out there, like let's say WWE and then AWA, and then later on something like ECW. It gave them that opportunity. So I believe if you were to bring a championship back, doesn't matter what company you are, whether you're TNA, your Ring of Honor, your WWE, your upcoming promotions like GWF or GFW, I should say GFW, you need to bring this kind of a championship in. And if I'm GFW, if I'm Global Force Wrestling, I'm Jeff Jarrett, I do that. Because you give a lot more people opportunities to make a statement. And that would definitely, that's a championship. Let's say the X Division and the six-sided ring help TNA differentiate themselves from everybody else, from any other wrestling promotion in the United States. The six-man championship would do the same for something like GFW, for Global Force Wrestling. It really would. Because it would show that everybody has an opportunity to become somebody and to be a champion. I think they need to bring that championship back into wrestling real soon. It's just a shame it was abandoned when it was. You could, I mean, heck, you had the Monday Night Wars WCW. You could have, WCW, you could have brought those championships back to really help contribute. You know what I'm saying? As far as the U.S. tag titles, I can understand why the NWA, WCW had those. Basically, they wanted to have a tag team answer to the U.S. heavyweight title, sort of put the world tag titles on the same equal level as the World Heavyweight Championship. And it actually worked because you had some teams, mostly like the Midnight Express, go from being not just the U.S. tag champions, but also become world tag team champions, if not simultaneously wearing both belts or holding both championships. So it did help elevate tag teams out there, or at least give tag teams that may never become the world tag team champions a chance to at least be champions as U.S. tag champs. Kind of like what the U.S. and Intercontinental Championships do in the WWE, or what the X Division title does, or the or the X Division title does in TNA, or what the television title does in Ring of Honor. So I truly believe I truly believe that championship was a positiveness for WW for for the NWA and WCW. And as much as I would like to see that championship brought back, and believe it or not, if you're doing a CAW league, a creative wrestling league, through your WWE 2K games, yeah, you are bringing those championships back like I did. I would say let them be where they are. They've had their run, and if they do want to be brought back again for an upcoming company like GFW, I would do it, and maybe even to help out some of the lower to mid-card teams, if not superstars in the WWF, or WWE, I should say. I would bring it back, maybe consider bringing it back to give them a run at titles, but you need a little bit more tag teams to get that going, if you know what I mean. But still, they had an important role, and I was happy they were around because they did help elevate some teams to at least, go down in history as to saying, hey, at least we were tag champions, but to say at least, hey, we were tag team champions, but we were only U.S. tag team champions, but that was something. Now, as far as the WCW women's title goes back in 96, 95, 96, I can understand why they did it. I mean, they noticed that WWE sort of had brought back the women's division, ladies division, whatever you want to call it, back in the early to mid 90s with Medusa as Alundra Blaze, and you had all these other ladies like Bull Nakano and Bertha Faye and Leilani Kai and all these ladies, including some of the international ones like Aja Kong, Ong and stuff. So I can understand what WCW was trying to go for here. They were trying to kind of recreate that magic. They were trying to recreate kind of recreate that magic, kind of recreate the opportunity to not only do what WWE did, but to outdo them as well. In other words, WCW saw that, like I said, I know I sound like a broken record. I sound like I'm repeating myself, but still, WCW saw what WWE did and felt that not only could they recreate that themselves, but they can also do it 10 times, if not 5 times better than what WWE did. And did they succeed? For a while, yes. They had a nice little 8 women's tag team. They had a nice little 8 women's tournament. But the only negative and drawback when it came to this championship was the fact that it was all done in conjoint partnership with Gaia Japan Pro Wrestling, which was a women's wrestling promotion in Japan. And what draws that back with the negative is the fact that the belt, because of this partnership, instead of being won by the person that you had signed to come back and be the face of your women's division, Medusa, instead of putting the belt on her, you decided to put the belt on one of the Gaia Japanese women wrestlers. Now, from what I've read about this Akiya Hota, whatever her name was, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. She's a very respected, very legendary women's wrestler in Japan. In fact, she had a whole show dedicated to her last match, to her retirement. So I can get why they did that for her, because for Gaia of Japan, which was just starting up at that time, it just really started up. And I think was basically about maybe a year old or less than a year old. To have someone like her on their roster meant something. So I can understand that through that partnership with WCW, they had to put the belt on her instead of Medusa. But they should have at least given Medusa a run with the belt instead of having Akiya just basically dominate her through all the matches. You should have at least given Medusa a run with the belt. So that was a negative to me. So even though, in a sense, the positive was they were trying to recreate the women's division, recreate the magic WWE had gotten when they did the women's division, and if not try to do it maybe 5 times better than what WWE did, the negative that drew them down was not just that they had a partnership with Gaia of Japan, and I'm not saying that was a total negative, because I can understand why they gave someone like Akiya Hota the belt. I can understand why they did that, because that was probably part of the agreement. But the negative was you never gave Medusa a run with the belt. I mean, imagine how bigger and how more important her title versus career match with Akiya could have been if Medusa would have walked in with the championship and not only lost the championship, but also lost her career at the same time. How important and significant that moment would be. But it never happened. And that was the negative that kind of drew down that women's division. And the fact that you never had the belt defended shortly after that. Yeah, you can have Mike Tenay come out on television and acknowledge, oh yeah, this lady is still the women's champion. But yet, according to records, she vacated the belt and it was run by somebody else. You know, that's the negative when you don't establish in your agreement that the belt has to be defended equally in the United States as well as in Japan. That's what happens. And then, just because you think you've succeeded somewhat with the women's championship, you decide, hey, well, on such a roll, us and our partnership with Gaia of Japan is on such a roll, let's make another women's title. And what do you make? The women's cruiserweight belt? Seriously? You make a women's cruiserweight belt, which consisted mostly of a 4 women's tournament, mostly women from the Gaia of Japan promotion, and then even though you may have tournament matches on Nitro, and if not Saturday night, and I think even Thunder at that time, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think Thunder was on at that time. But still, you have them on Nitro on Saturday night. Yet, how do you crown your first women's cruiserweight champion? How do you do that? By having the championship match not on a pay-per-view like you did the women's title, but on a match filmed on WCW Main Event. A match filmed inside a half-filled arena that was getting ready. Basically a half-filled arena of fans, just piling in to watch, or gathering in to watch an episode of Nitro. That's how you crown your women's cruiserweight champion. On an episode of Main Event that was taped, with a match that was taped inside a half-filled Nitro, half-filled arena of fans, piling in, gathering in to watch Nitro. That's how you crown your first women's cruiserweight champion. And instead of, again, trying to get it equal balanced out to where you have it defended both in the U.S. and Japan, you instead have it mostly in Japan. And this is what gets me. If this is the case, when I look back on it, if this is the case, why didn't you just say why didn't you come out and say as part of our part and announce that, hey, and I think they did announce it, but why couldn't you just say as part of the Gaia, when you did the Cruiserweight Championship, why couldn't WCW and Eric Bischoff and some of them say, as part of the Gaia partnership, or part of our partnership with Gaia Japan Pro Wrestling, we are going to be holding a 4 women's tournament to crown the first ever Gaia Japan, or first ever Gaia Cruiserweight Champion, instead of naming it WCW. Yeah, you want to put your name on everything, but here's the thing. How does that work for your company if the belt's not defended in your company, or even in the country that your company's founded in? Doesn't make sense, does it? Then we get to the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles, which were being established in 2001. Yeah. You want to talk about historic? How about a championship that was only active for less than a week or so? How about that? How about a championship that was active for a little over less than a week? Yeah. You have this big tournament with all these cruiserweight tag teams, which some of them consisted of, some of them consisting of 2 guys, Some of them consisting of several people that would help put the X Division and TNA on the map. Like, let's say, AJ Styles and, let's say, Elix Skipper. You decide that you're going to you decide to have this big old tournament, like I said, that consists of people like AJ Styles, Elix Skipper, Shannon Moore, Shane Helms, you name it. And yet, when you're establishing this tournament to crown Cruiserweight Tag Champions, which you do in Kid Romeo and Elix Skipper, what happens? 8 days later, you have them lose the belts to Kidman and Mysterio, who they beat for at WCW Greed, the last pay-per-view, if you will, for WCW. You have them win it there, and then on the last Nitro, you have Kidman and Mysterio win it, and then that's it. Titles get deactivated. You don't even try to get WWE to say, hey, keep these Cruiserweight tag titles around because you might need them. No, that's it. Shortest championship ever. Shortest active championship ever. 8-day reign. That's it. 8-day existence. A little over a week existence. That's it. Nothing else. If I was WCW, I would have made a Cruiserweight Tag Team title years before this. I mean, the potential of this championship was just, the possibilities were endless. I mean, I'll tell you this, when I went to a Q&A back in 2006, 2005, and I asked AJ Styles this, me and several others, we actually had a Q&A with AJ Styles. And I asked him about this. He said basically that he saw the potential, that he was hoping that this championship would be around. He saw potential in a Cruiserweight Tag Team title. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And WWE, instead of deciding, hey, we're going to have the Cruiserweights, we're going to have the Cruiserweights and the Light Heavyweights anyway. We're going to have our own we're going to have the Cruiserweight division anyway. Why not just keep the belts just in case? Did they do that? No. They decided to abandon them. And you know what? I don't blame WWE for abandoning it. I blame WCW for not coming up with the idea years before when the Cruiserweight division was hot and could have really used it. But that was the booking of WCW. Apparently they thought they weren't going to get bought out by WWE and decided, you know what? Let's do a Cruiserweight Tag Team title tournament and see what happens. Oh yeah, that really meant something, didn't it? Oh yeah, that really meant something, didn't it? It didn't mean diddly squat, because basically your tournament didn't mean shit. Every team, every Cruiserweight that was in that tournament basically had, even though they may have been paid well, not saying they were, every person that was in that tournament, I'm sure looks back on it with regret. Even those that became, even Romeo, Kid Romeo and Elix Skipper. I'm sure they look back on it with regret because it's like, now, yeah, they became the champions, but then they lose it about a week later. What was the point of them even winning? What was the point of them even winning? What was the point of Mysterio and Kidman winning? Here are two guys that went on to become big names, in a sense, in WWE. What was the point of them winning? Or being in the tournament if you're going to have them lose at Greed and then win it on the last Nitro? It's like, what was the point? I mean, I could understand and respect the fact that maybe it could have been, I could understand and respect maybe having a Cruiserweight Tag Team Championship, years before when the Cruiserweight division really meant something and really differed WCW from everybody else. Sort of like what the X Division did for TNA. But to make the decision to decide and have a Cruiserweight Tag Team Championship in your final months of existence, and to crown and to make it active in your final, sorry, my hand hit the mic there, but still, it's confusing. It's confusing as heck. I mean, why would you do this? You could have done it when the division was hot, when the division meant something. You had a lot of established names, too, in that division at the time. You had Jerichos, you had Guerreros, you had Malenkos, you had Benoits. You had Mysterios, you had Juventudes, you had Lash Luau. You You had Cyclope. You had Super Callo. You had Chavo. I mean, the list is endless of the cruiserweights you had. And yet you decide, oh, let's crown the champions in our final few months of existence because maybe we're going to not get bought out by WWE and maybe we'll still be around when the time is right. If they would have... Here's the thing. I would have respected WCW more so even if they would have crowned Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions in 2000. Made the Cruiserweight Tag Titles one of the belts that was going to get introduced in the reboot under Russo and Bischoff. I could have respected that then. I could have respected it in 99, 97, 98, 96, all those years. But you decide that instead of doing it at a time when your division is hot, you decide to do it in your final few months of existence, all because you think you're going to be okay. All because you think you're going to be alright. Bullshit. Bullshit. And to me, that's what I think about the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. As potentially as good as they could have been made and done years before when the Cruiserweight division meant something. Not in the final freaking months. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on some of these now defunct championships that WCW had in existence. Let me know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on some of the championships that I mentioned? How do you feel they should have been done and presented? Comment below. And I'll talk to y'all later. God bless. Take care.